Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hello and welcome to everyone's favorite, the infamous Golden Toilet Awards of Kamigawa Neon Dynasty / the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty Precons. That's a mouthful. Regardless, in the main set and in the precons are a lot of exciting and inspiring commanders that many players are very excited to build around. And then there's the ones that are in this episode. Unfortunately for every single commander in this episode, this is not the type of award that you actually want to win. Or actually, even be nominated for, but definitely not win. Now these commanders might be bland or uninspiring, or maybe I just really don't like them for one reason or another. Regardless, the winner of this award will of course be receiving the Golden Toilet, which of course is a golden toilet made of pure gold. Definitely pure gold. And of course, the commander that does receive this award will receive this toilet and the shame that comes along with it forever. Now, commanders can be considered for this award for a multitude of reasons, some of which I've already mentioned. But again, at the end of the day, every single commander selected for this award is 100% based off of my own opinion. So the commanders that you might select for this award might be very different, and that's okay. And in fact, your very favorite commander from this set might actually win this award, and if that happens, well, my apologies. Also, just to clarify, this is not a list of the weakest commanders from the set in the precons. This is a list of my least favorite, which are two very different things. And it's also a completely different episode, and in that episode I'm going to be going through the tier rankings of all the commanders from the precons and the main set, so be on the lookout for that. Now, before we actually jump into the awards ceremony, a big thank you to Eddie for all the great discussions around these commanders and around all the cards in this set, and yeah, just a big thank you to Eddie for all your help. And of course, also, if I make any mistakes in this episode or any other episode, make sure you blame Eddie below in the comments because, well, it's always Eddie's fault. It's never my fault. Everyone, please remember that. So now with all that said, let's jump into it. So let's start things off with number 10, the furthest thing from number 1 on this list, well, you know, outside of all the other commanders that actually didn't make the list. And coming in at 10th place, we've got Kyodai, Soul of Kamigawa. Kyodai is a 3/3 Dragon Spirit with Flash and Flying that costs 3 and a white, and when it enters the battlefield, another target permanent gains indestructible for as long as you control Kyodai. And also, just seemingly slapped on here is Wooburg, it gets +5/+5 until end of turn. Now, these days, just slapping 5-color activated ability that essentially doesn't, relate to anything with the card just kind of seems like a very lazy card design. Because that activated ability really doesn't do anything for this commander. I mean, okay, yes, it does make it into a bigger threat, but it doesn't, have any kind of an interaction with what this commander does. And what it does, well, is basically just like an Aegis Angel from your command zone with Flash. That's essentially it. So instead of this being like an interesting 5-color commander, which again, you only get so many of those 5-color commanders every year, we get, hey, Aegis Angel in your command zone that also can be 5-color. Look, we're making 5-color commanders. Cool. So yeah, overall, not a whole lot going on here. And actually, this probably would have finished a lot higher had Eddie not come up with a pretty decent deck idea around it. Blame Eddie for that, please. So blame Eddie for utilizing cards like Boros Reckoner, True Conviction, and Blazing Sunsteel in a deck built around this commander. Boros Reckoner has whenever it's dealt damage deals that much damage to target creature or player. Again, Kyodai can actually give a creature indestructible for as long as Kyodai is in play. So you make Boros Reckoner indestructible. Then when it's dealt damage, it can infinitely deal damage to itself. Now, why does that matter? Well, it doesn't, unless you've got something like True Conviction in play. This says creatures you control have double strike and lifelink, with lifelink being actually the more important one for this deck. Because if Boros Reckoner has lifelink and it can infinitely deal damage to itself, well, then you can gain infinite life. Now, of course, there are only so many creatures that do this kind of thing like Boros Reckoner. There are a few, actually, but there's also a card called Blazing Sunsteel, which can help out as well. It says, whenever equipped creature is dealt damage, deals that much damage to any target. So again, basically Boros Reckoner, but on an equipment. And of course, with this, then, if you attach it to something like an enraged creature, or should I say a creature that has an enraged trigger, well, you can get that trigger an infinite number of times. Again, granted that that creature is indestructible, thanks to your commander. Regardless, yeah, this is a pretty specific deck, but a pretty interesting one. And you can blame Eddie again for, this, whole concept existing, or, me bringing it up. I'm sure other people thought about it as well. Regardless, Kyodai would have finished higher on this list had it not been for this concept, so you can blame Eddie for that. But yeah, I mean, again, it seems kind of like lazy design these days, just to slap on a 5-color ability that has nothing to do with the commander or what it wants to do. So, hoping that moving forward, Wizards will stop doing that. And if you are going to make a 5-color commander, make it work like, a 5-color commander. Make the ability actually function with the commander. Am I nitpicking? Absolutely, but that's pretty much my job on this episode. But now we're moving on from number 10 to number 9. And coming in at 9th place, we've got Tameshi, Reality Architect. Tameshi is a 2/3 Moonfolk wizard that costs 2 and a blue, and it says, whenever one or more non-creature permanents are returned to hand, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. And by paying X and a white, return a land you control to its owner's hand, and return target artifact or enchantment card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. A couple of things that I don't like about this card. And there might be some things that many players like about this card, and that's okay. There are a ton of limiting factors on that trigger. First off, the first limiting factor is 1 or more, and that one's actually pretty understandable. I think that one is fine. If I cast a massive bounce spell and I bounce a lot of things back to my hand, well, maybe I shouldn't be rewarded with a ton of card draw. Secondly, a part that I don't agree with, though, non-creature permanents. Non-creature. So if I bounce a creature, that doesn't matter. I have to bounce a non-creature permanent for this to count. So that takes a lot of exciting options away from this commander in how it can work and ways that you can play it, and basically those unsummon type cards just don't work with this commander. When, unsummon, and cards like it could be a really cool addition to a deck like this. And finally, of course, in the limiting factor that I really don't like on a lot of things, this ability triggers only once each turn. Boo! As a Johnny, I really dislike those words on a lot of cards. Now, yes, you can have some cool graveyard interactions by bouncing lands back to your hand. Sure, but still, that first part just completely rubbed me the wrong way. Too many limiting factors when this card had a lot more potential and a lot more fun things that you can do with it. Now, obviously, you can still take advantage of cards like Alchemist Retrieval, which, can bounce target non-land permanent you control back to its owner's hand, or if you cleave it, anything, essentially. Regardless, yeah, 1 mana, bounce a non-creature permanent you have, you draw a card. Cool, but again, you only get that once each turn, and again, it can't be a creature. And of course, you can take advantage of artifacts and enchantments that you actually want to get in your graveyard, like Skycloud Egg, which, you can sacrifice for mana and also draw a card. And of course, there are ways to actually get those lands that you're bouncing back to your hand from that activated ability back into play with, like a Walking Atlas, though there are only so many of those ways to do it in actually Azorius. Regardless, again, in my opinion, too many unnecessary limiting factors. Not that some limiting factors aren't necessary, but there are just too many on this card. Again, there's literally like 3 right in that first, part. But now it's time to move away from number 9 and on to number 8. And coming in at 8th place, okay, I kind of cheated here. I am not including all these as separate commanders, because the reason that they have made this list is essentially the exact same reason, but the brand new Shrine Commanders, if you can really call them that, the monocolored ones, are, well, let's just say lackluster. So, of course, just to name them out really quick, I'm talking about Goshin, Taya, Balanced Vigor, Ancient Wars, Lost Wisdom, Shared Purpose, and Hidden Cruelty. Each of these are brand new legendary enchantment creature shrines from this set, and I don't like them. Or maybe I should say, I don't like them as commanders. And okay, this is the part of the episode where some are going to go to the comments and say, every creature that's legendary isn't meant to be a commander, and that's what they type in the comments, and Yes, I understand that. Does that take away from them actually being included in this episode? No, because I made the episode. They are legendary creatures, therefore they can be a commander, and therefore they're up to consideration for the Golden Toilet Awards, being terrible commanders. And boy are these terrible commanders. I mean, let's just look at Go-Shintai of Shared Purpose, a 1/3 shrine with vigilance that costs 3 and a white. It says at the beginning of your end step, you may pay 1 if you do create a 1/1 color spirit creature token for each shrine you control. When it comes to the number of shrines that you have access to in a mono-white deck, the answer is, at this point, I believe, 3. So, at the peak of this commander's power, you essentially can say, hey, it's my end step. I will pay 1. If I have a mana, then I'll pay 1. And then I get 3 1/1s. Take that, opponents. So again, actually, literally, I mean, in a mono-white shrine build, you've got access to that shrine, Haunted of Cleansing Fire, and Sanctum of Tranquil Light. So cool. At the beginning of your upkeep, you can gain 2 life for each shrine you control. If you've got all of them in play, you get 6 life. And again, if you pay 1 at the end of your turn, you get those 3 tokens. And then Sanctum of Tranquil Light has pay 5 and a white, tap target creature's ability cost 1 to activate for each shrine you control. So yeah, sure. Pay 2 and a white, tap target creature. Good for you. And I guess technically, like with Helm of the Host, you could get more copies of this awful commander. And then cool. You can still have to pay mana for each of them, though, to actually make creature tokens. Overall, yes, I understand that they made them legendary for a reason, but again, for this episode, they are legendary creatures, they are considered commanders, and they are pretty terrible at that. But now let's move on from number 8 and move on to number 7. And coming in at 7th place, we've got yet another commander. Okay, and you know what? I'm probably going to make these quicker now because, yeah, the exact same comment's probably going to happen. It wasn't meant to be a commander. That is up for debate, and as always, I'm trying to have a level playing field with these things as much as I can, so I'm including all the commanders. Regardless, I'm not going to rehash this again. Or I should say I'm sorry that I just did. Regardless, Katos the Silent Spider, a 4/4 human ninja for 3 blue-black. When it enters the battlefield, exile target card other than a basic land from an opponent's graveyard. Search that player's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the same name as that card and exile them. Then that player shuffles. For as long as you control Katos, you may play one of the exiled cards, and you may spend mana or mana of any color to cast it. So obviously this can be more impactful in a format where, players can play more than, one of each card, because Commander is a singleton format. That being said, they did make it legendary for whatever reason. Maybe that's a standard reason, regardless. Outside of exiling a card from a graveyard that you get access to, one benefit is obviously that, hey, you can see your entire opponent's, graveyard, which you can always see, hand, which you can't always see, and of course, library that you can't always see. So this gives you perfect information on an opponent just by coming into play. That being said, one thing that can definitely hamper this card and make it a much less effective commander than it could be is, well, that you are essentially limited to only being able to play one of the exiled cards as long as you control this commander. So essentially, yeah, you can do it one at a time. So you either lose the card or you essentially lose access to the card, and, you can't just, utilize blink cards to, get more cards access to. You can't just build up this access pile. You are limited to one card at a time, and if you don't cast the card, it's gone. Now, obviously, if you are building around this card, you can still utilize blink cards like Essence Flux to, reset this commander essentially and get access to another card, but again, you can't build up that pile. So because of that, though, you're going to want to utilize a lot of mana rocks, a ton, like Thran Dynamo, a very effective one that can tap for 3, because, yeah, you're going to want to be able to use those cards pretty quickly. And of course, if your friend has a Shadowborn Apostle deck, or a Persistent Petitioners deck, or a Relentless Rats deck, or a Rat Colony deck, well, have fun. Because Shadowborn Apostle, like those other cards, is one of the very few cards in Magic that says a deck can have any number of it. So in Commander, these are the very few cards that break the singleton rule, essentially, and yeah, if there is one Shadowborn Apostle in their graveyard, which there is going to be at some point, you just use your commander to exile it, and then you exile all the Shadowborn Apostles in their graveyard, in their hand, and in their library, and their deck is ruined. And yeah, your friend probably is never going to play against you with that deck when you're playing this one. Regardless, I definitely think there were small tweaks that could have been made to make this into a more effective commander, and those effects would not have broken it for any other format. Or at least, again, that's just my opinion. Anyways, let's go from number 7 to number 6. And coming in at 6th place is Heiko Yamazaki, the General. Heiko is a 3/3 human samurai with trample that costs 3 and a red. It has whenever a samurai or warrior you control attacks alone, you may cast target artifact card from your graveyard this turn. Snooze. That is not a lot of value for a decent restriction. Obviously, you can attack, with your commander, but you're probably putting your commander at pretty heavy risk because it's just a 3/3 with trample. Or if you've got other samurai or warriors in your deck, sure, attack with them, but you can only attack with one. So again, you have to limit your combat to just attacking with one creature, just to be able to cast an artifact from your graveyard this turn. Yeah, to me, that's not inspiring. So obviously, you're going to want some ways to actually get your commander through, like maybe a Whisper Silk Cloak, so it can't be blocked and has Shroud. Protects your commander so you can actually guarantee that you can keep swinging and actually getting the ability to cast artifacts from your graveyard. And obviously, you also want specific artifacts in your graveyard, so yeah, Goblin Engineer can help with that. When it enters the battlefield, you can search your library for an artifact card, put in your graveyard, then shuffle your library. And sure, if you really want to, yeah, you can Mindslaver Lock with this commander. Go for it. Okay, I shouldn't say go for it. If your playgroup's okay with that, go for it. Mindslaver is a legendary artifact that costs 6. By paying 4 and tapping and sacrificing it, you control target player during that player's next turn. But yeah, outside of that direction for the deck, I just don't see a lot of potential with this commander, and it's not all that interesting. And again, it's very limiting, so yeah, it has made this list. So let's move on from number 6 to number 5. And coming in at 5th place, we've got Norika Yamazaki, the Poet. Oh, okay, yeah, and this one essentially is the exact same, essentially, as the last commander, but slightly different, so I'll go really quick through it because, for the exact same reasons, it has made this list. It's a 3/2 human samurai with vigilance that costs 2 and a white that says, whenever a samurai or warrior you control attacks alone, you may cast target enchantment card from your graveyard this turn. Basically, exact same thing, but a 3/2 with vigilance, costs 1 less, and the attack alone trigger is now casting an enchantment from your graveyard instead of, an artifact. Woo! Not exciting, not inspiring, and you can't even Mindslaver Lock an opponent. Actually, I guess the reason that I put this one higher up on the list is essentially there's more things that you can do with artifacts in your graveyard than enchantments, typically. Now, obviously, there are things that you can do with this, with enchantments that actually go into your graveyard, like Seal of Cleansing, Elspeth Conquers Death, and Solitary Confinement. Seal of Cleansing says sacrifice Seal of Cleansing, destroy a target artifact or enchantment. Elspeth Conquers Death and other sagas like it essentially build up lore counters until they get to the last one, you get value from each of those, and then it goes into your graveyard. And Solitary Confinement is an enchantment that says, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Solitary Confinement unless you discard a card, skip your draw step, you have Shroud, prevent all damage to be dealt to you. So whether enchantments are sacrificed for value, or just sacrificed naturally, or sacrificed because you don't meet a requirement, you can get those back with this commander. Regardless, again, to do that, you need to either put your commander or just one creature into danger. You're prevented from attacking with other creatures other than that one creature, and you still have to actually pay the cost. And yeah, there are just other commanders out there that do all of this basically a lot more efficiently in a lot more interesting ways. But now let's move from number 5 and on to number 4. And in 4th place, we've got Naomi, Pillar of Order. It's a 4/4 human advisor for 3 white-black, and it has, when it enters the battlefield or attacks, if you control an artifact and an enchantment, create a 2/2 white samurai creature token with vigilance. So that's a decent requirement right there for not a big payoff. I mean, obviously, just naturally throughout the game, if you've got a decent amount of artifacts and enchantments in your deck, you can get, both in play. And then cool, when this either enters the battlefield or attacks, you get a 2/2 with vigilance. Yay! It's just really not an exciting thing to build around at all. Again, your payoff for meeting the requirements is just a 2/2. So just pretty boring overall, in my opinion. I mean, if you really want to get spicy, you can meet both requirements with one card like Whip of Erebos. And then you know what? Your creatures, including those 2/2s with vigilance, have lifelink. Yay! And of course, if you really want to get crazy with this commander, use blink cards like Cloud Shift. Actually blink it and it'll come back, and then you get another samurai. Woo! And maybe you can make those samurai even deadlier with Intangible Virtue, giving them ++1 and, oh wait, they already have vigilance. Okay, well, still +1/+1. Yeah, just overall not inspiring, and yeah, not something that I'm looking to build around personally. But now we're moving away from number 4 and onto the top 3 with number 3 with Ryu Storm's Edge. Ryu Storm's Edge is a 3/3 human samurai with first strike that costs 2 red-white. It has some very familiar text. Whenever a samurai or warrior you control attacks alone, untap it. Okay, well that untap it part isn't, what we typically see. But anyways, let's keep going. If it's the first combat phase of the turn, there's additional combat phase after this phase. So definitely a bigger payoff than the other 2 commanders that we've talked about that have been similar, but still pretty lackluster. I mean, again, basically, okay, this does say whenever a samurai or warrior. So yes, if you have a samurai or warrior army in play, cool. You can choose which one you want to attack with, but you can still only attack with one to get this trigger. So it's kind of like, hey, you can incorporate some go wide strategies with a, like a samurai warrior tribal deck, But not really, because you don't really benefit from them. So instead of like an interesting samurai warrior, tribal deck with some synergies, it's more so like, hey, yeah, you're just mostly benefited for, getting some equipment out, maybe, suiting Ryu up with, some equipment, some auras, maybe some anthems, and then swinging again, a Voltron deck. And not that Voltron decks and Voltron commanders can't be interesting or unique, it's just that kind of, again, the way that all of these samurai warrior attack alone, triggers are, they're just kind of awkward. So yeah, if you want to build around this, obviously, suit it up with, equipment like Blackblade or Forge, which is going to get +1/+1 for each land you control. So yeah, swing, hit hard, and then untap, swing again, hit really hard. Or how about Duelist Heritage, an enchantment that says whenever one or more creatures attack, you may have target attacking creature gain double strike until end of turn. So yeah, upgrade that first strike to double strike to hit even harder. Speaking of which, of course, you can also utilize other extra combat spells like Relentless Assault, which says a lot of things, but it's basically, hey, you get an extra combat. So yeah, again, basically with the right setup, at a certain point, you can easily take out, one player, maybe even two during combat. Regardless, again, at the end of the day, I think there's a good amount of wasted potential with these types of commanders. They were kind of taking them in an interesting way, but not so much, and they kind of just fall flat on their face. But now let's move away from number 3 and on to number 2. And coming in at second place, we've got yet another samurai, but not a, samurai warrior mentioning commander, with Rasona Asari Commander. A commander that literally tells you it's a commander in the name. Anyways, Rasona is a 3/3 human samurai with haste that costs 1 red-white. When it deals combat damage to a player, if it doesn't have an indestructible counter on it, put an indestructible counter on it. Whenever combat damage is dealt to you, remove an indestructible counter from Rasona. So the design of this commander is just kind of really, lame. For whatever reason, they felt like it was necessary to limit the number of indestructible counters on this, from what Rasona can get on itself, to 1. To get that counter, you actually have to hit a player. Obviously, this doesn't have any evasion, but if you get down early enough, that haste should let you get that first counter. But again, even if you hit again, if you already have that indestructible counter on it, it doesn't matter. You can't get a second one. On top of that, if any player hits you, this is basically like the Monarch, you lose that indestructible counter. Even if you somehow get more counters on this, if more than one creature hits you to the amount of counters that you have on it, you lose those counters and it's not indestructible anymore. I mean, it's just kind of a boring commander, number 1. Number 2, some of the design decisions, in my opinion, are questionable. And number 3, there's really only one way to actually build this commander in an effective way, and that isn't, well, the most friendly of ways. And that would be a Wrath Tribal build. I mean, maybe throw some Proliferate in there as well to get extra counters on, but yeah, Wrath Tribal. So yeah, utilize cards like Rogue's Passage, Wrath of God, and World Slayer. Rogue's Passage and other cards like it help make your commander unblockable, so yeah, you can get through to get that indestructible counter on it. Then you cast a lot of Wraths. I mean, Wrath of God, the original Wrath, says draw creatures that can't be regenerated. So with your commander being indestructible, it's going to survive, again, if it has that counter on it, and yeah, your opponent's creatures most likely won't. So with this kind of a commander, you're heavily incentivized to run a ton of Wraths in your deck, which yeah, isn't going to be the most fun for your playgroup most likely. And yeah, sure, you can throw World Slayer in there too. Because whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, destroy all opponents other than World Slayer. So again, because your commander is indestructible, then yeah, both this and your commander survive, and you just keep doing it again and again and again. And at that point, your opponent should probably concede. Regardless, again with Rasona, just some of the design decisions I'm questioning, and also again, when it comes to actually wanting to build around the commander, if you want to do it effectively, you're building a deck that, well, there's already other commanders out there that do this, and it's maybe not the best for most playgroups. But now the moment that you've all been waiting for, the golden toilet of Kamigawa Neon Dynasty / the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty precons. And the winner of the golden toilet of Kamigawa Neon Dynasty is... okay, I'm cheating here. The Myojins. That's right, I put all 5 of the Myojins right here. And just a heads up, I do get salty and I bet on my soapbox in this section, so just a heads up on that. And I actually already made an entire episode on how Wizards messed up on these. And yeah, they did not have to. They absolutely did not have to. There is no reason that they had to. I'll go through this quickly, but again, if you want to watch the entire episode on it, go for it. For example, Myojin of Cryptic Dreams is a 3/3 spirit that costs 5 blue, blue, blue. It enters the battlefield with an indestructible counter on it if you cast it from your hand. And by removing an indestructible counter from it, you copy target permanent spell you control 3 times. So these commanders do not work intentionally. Wizards chose not to include if you cast it from your hand or the command zone. And yes, again, I know there are those of you out there, and that's completely fine and I understand it, that are going to say, not every commander is meant to be a commander. Okay, sorry, I mean, not every legendary creature is meant to be a commander. You know what I mean. But just hear me out. If these Myojin had the exact text that they should have, again, enters the battlefield indestructible counter on it if you cast from your hand or the command zone, so they function properly as well-designed commanders, they would not be broken. They would not be problematic. They are 8 mana, mono-colored commanders. Do they have powerful abilities? Sure. Are they ban-worthy? Absolutely not. I mean, even in comparison to the same set, if you take the top end, Myojin of Cryptic Dreams probably is the most powerful ability, it's nowhere near Hinata in this exact same set. It's also nowhere near Jinga Taxius in the exact same set. So my main problem with these cards, and the reason that they all won number 1, again as one giant group of Myojin, they being, the Golden Toilet, is that they were intentionally designed poorly. Wizards knew what it had to do to make a legendary creature work in the command zone, and they said, no, we're not going to do that. We are going to take the decision out of the players' hands because we know what's best for the players. Because Wizards always knows what's best for the players, right? So instead of giving the players the option to actually use these as their commanders, they said, no, you can't, unless you go through an incredibly convoluted route to actually make them work. At the end of the day, Wizards, instead of just making these more open and allowing players to make their own decisions on them, restricted players to just one thing, Bees in the 99. Because for whatever reason, Wizards doesn't want you to build a commander deck around these cards, even if you want to. And that small change would have made absolutely no difference to these cards being in the 99 of decks. They wouldn't affect anything at all except just give you the option of all of these as commanders that can have interesting builds around them. At the end of the day, Wizards should have given players the option to make their own choices. So to me, this is just intentional bad design. Shame on you, Wizards. And of course, because of your terrible decisions, Wizards, all of the Myojin are now the golden toilets of this set in the precons. So Myojin, expect some golden toilets in the mail coming toward you. Even though I know actually at the end of the day that these golden toilets should probably be going to Wizards themselves. Yeah. Am I salty? Am I bitter? Maybe. Regardless, a huge thank you to all the commanders that competed for this not-so-prestigious award. And if you haven't seen my most recent episode on the Golden Pig of Kamigawa Neon Dynasty and the precons, make sure you check that one out at some point as well. It's basically the exact opposite of this one. But instead of it being the worst commanders, in my opinion, it's the best commanders, in my opinion, and instead of them getting a golden toilet in the mail, they get a golden pig, which is, yes, of course, much better. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed the Golden Toilet Awards, and of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one.